Hey everyone, welcome to the Digital Rundown podcast. My name is Alexis. I am joined here with my co-host,
Anthony.
And if you are tuning in on YouTube, you'll notice something a little bit different with our setup. We got a cool little neon sign back here, and we switched it up a bit. We're still new to this, so definitely give us a chance to figure out the setting, but we'll get there, I promise. So today we kind of wanted to talk about the evolution of marketing, the evolution of technology, stuff like that. When I think back to technology and growing up, like my mind instantly goes to those days with like dial-up internet, AOL Instant Messenger, and MySpace. Where does it take you, Anthony?
So when I was little, dial-up was a little expensive for my family, but I remember some friends had it. And I remember the whole thing about making sure, the mom yelling at us for, using the internet when she needed to have a phone call. I definitely, in my generation, we had Messenger with Hotmail and also High Five. Are you familiar with that social platform?
I've never heard of High Five. I have heard of MSN Messenger. Back where I was from, it was really popular to have like an AIM messenger, so AOL Instant Messenger. Mm-hmm. I don't know if MSN was similar, but we had like these horrible screen names that like are so cringeworthy now when we look back on them. And like your away message, did yours have away messages that you could set?
I don't remember. I think it was just you could see people's names and whether they were active or not. It would be green or gray or yellow if they were like away.
On AIM, you could set these away messages. So it would be a lot of song lyrics, like super emo song lyrics, or giving people a rundown of your day, like gotta go to class, gotta do homework, be back after soccer practice, something like that.
Kind of like Twitter?
Yeah. But it was so people knew you were away, even though you're online. And then I also remember when people would join like AIM, like they would enter it, like sign on. It would make a little noise, right? And you could set a noise for a certain person.
Oh.
Yeah, so when your crush was signing on, for example, because we were like these little kids in elementary school, you'd have a different like noise for your crush. So all of a sudden you'd hear that noise and you'd like go running to the computer to talk to them.
Oh my God. I remember that. I guess I didn't have that. Or if we did, I just never used it.
Yeah. And then I feel like AIM kind of, at least here in the States, evolved into like MySpace, right? Once we got off AIM, that was kind of the first social media, at least that my generation started using.
We had High Five. And funny enough, I remember when Facebook came out, I thought Facebook was a copy of High Five. Because High Five was like you could upload pictures and comment on them and make posts of like text, post what you were thinking or you were doing that day. That was my first introduction to social media.
MySpace was pretty similar to that. It had a photo album where you could upload stuff, people could comment on it. But the fun thing about MySpace was that it had this feature called the Top 8. And it was ruthless. Like to get on people's top 8 was like a big deal because that's where you would essentially list like your best friends in order. And then let's say you and your friend had a falling out and you got moved down in the top 8.
Hierarchies are always a social problem. I'm telling you. I bet that caused a lot of drama.
Oh, it caused so much drama. And you were able to pick a song on your profile. So you could add a song to your profile. And so when people would go into your profile, they'd have to listen to your music.
Oh, okay. This seems pretty cool.
Yeah. And that's also how people in my generation back then all learned HTML, basic HTML coding. We were these little 9, 8-year-olds sitting there coding our profile so that we could get like glittery backgrounds and all of this stuff.
I remember taking my first picture for Facebook. That was like my first introduction to selfies too. Like I think that's probably the first selfie I have of me taking a profile picture for Facebook. And never would I ever imagine that the Facebook back then was gonna give me work like in my 20s and 30s. So yeah, it is very interesting to see how Facebook transitioned into this friends and family wall to something where you can see things that interest you, things for work or things for your, leisure, vacation stuff, everything. So definitely, I would have never imagined, that 10 years later, I would be working with Facebook, that my job, like a big majority of my work would be being done on Facebook.
Yeah, I remember when Facebook started out, it was strictly for like college kids. And I think it had a different name. I can't remember off the top of my head. But when Facebook finally allowed like high schoolers in, it was game over. That's when Facebook kind of really started to take over the digital marketing game. And then Facebook eventually ran MySpace out of the running. Now MySpace is just a distant memory. So when looking back at digital marketing, it's kind of the same thing, right? Digital marketing has changed so much over the years. I mean, we used to have banner ads, pop-up ads, and the way it's evolved is just crazy. So we kind of, before we go into our topic, wanted to give you just a rundown on the timeline of digital marketing. So digital marketing first came around in 1994. That is back when the first banner ad was launched. It feels like a really long time ago now, and some of you may not have even been alive, but 94 first banner ad was launched. It was on a website called Hotwire, and it was bought by AT&T. AT&T actually paid $30,000 for this contract. So it was a paid placement, not paid off of any metrics or anything like that. It was a 3-month contract that they had with this website, and it actually brought in a 44% click-through rate. That would make marketers, if you had a 44% click-through rate nowadays, that would just be insane.
Now it's like, never is really rare, like more than one, right?
Yeah, I think the average is something like 0.06%. So next we go to 1995. 1995 is when we see the first frequency caps coming into play. A company called WebConnect built out something called a custom view tool that allowed marketers to implement those. 1996 is when we see tracking tools really come into play. Google created DoubleClick, which if you are a marketer and have used that recently, you know how much of a pain DoubleClick can be. I have nightmares just hearing the name of it. But that finally emerged on the scene and was one of the first ROI tools that allowed advertisers to track views and clicks. It also allowed advertisers to edit and optimize their live campaigns. So that's something they weren't able to do before. You kind of only got insight into performance. It could change it after your paid contract was up. It also gave rise to CPM as a pricing strategy over using a flat fee.
So continuing in 97 is when we saw the first pop-up ad. And yeah, I'm sure you've seen one, right? Those really annoying pop-ups that you get on your screen. So back then you would have to exit 3 of them. Well, funny enough, the person who wrote the code later apologized for creating it. So continuing into 99, advertisers shifted from banner ads to search ads and PPC strategy. The first PPC search ads were placed on goto.com in 1999.
Then we jump into 2000. That's when Google AdWords was born. They introduced a quality score. So now they're taking into consideration your ad relevance versus just outbidding people. So the more relevant your ad is, the higher that you're going to get placed in the SERP. Your rank wasn't determined solely based on who has the highest bid.
And following 2006, Facebook introduced ads. It started as small displays and sponsored links. But later it grew into ads with targeting, where you can target people based on demographics and interests.
Then we jump further into 2010. That's when content really starts taking over the scene. Content takes off, and as advertisers start focusing on making more content that felt native to the platform.
And this is crazy because in 2010, I was just entering college. And all of this great stuff, it was starting. And then by the time we were finished with our majors and we, got into the industry, we were working on it.
And I feel like we're in a really unique position because we grew up using these social platforms. We kind of saw the evolution of it firsthand from a user perspective. And then we went to college, we graduated, and now we're working in a professional perspective, which I think helps give us a little bit of an advantage when it comes to it. We know what users are looking for, the way they engage, and the way they interact for sure.
Yeah. So Alexis and I have more than 5 years of experience in digital marketing. But 2017, which is 5 years ago, a lot of stuff happened. And we think it's really cool to look back and see what the challenge was back then, what things we were facing.
I know that marketing and digital marketing has changed so much even since I've started working in it. That's the thing with this industry. It's so changing constantly that you really have to keep up. So it's fun kind of taking like a little 5-year snapshot and seeing how it's changed since we started working in it.
So starting in 2017, I was very early in my marketing career. I had stopped working in email marketing and I started working in digital marketing, Facebook, Instagram. And that's when I started working with yours truly. I changed companies in 2017 at the very beginning, and Alexis was my coworker that was actually sitting right next to me.
Aw. Yeah, 2017, I was about 1 year into social media advertising, so still pretty fresh, but definitely getting the hang of it. Some things that I remember being a hot topic back then was definitely the misinformation spreading on Facebook. Facebook got in a lot of trouble with that, not to get into politics, but, you know, we had the election and the Russia meddling, all that stuff. So spreading of misinformation was definitely a hot topic. And I think that these platforms were being held accountable and it caused them to have to make a lot of adjustments. And I think with that comes the YouTube issue that came up as well. There were a lot of brand safety concerns when it came to YouTube that year, so much so that AT&T and Verizon actually pulled their advertising spend because they found out that their ads were running alongside questionable and extremist content. So yeah, YouTube really had to pivot to kind of give advertisers a way to feel comfortable that they were showing on quality content.
So politics was huge in 2017, and of course it was going to affect Facebook. Moving on to more like pop culture things, 2017 was the year when Kendall Jenner had the Pepsi commercial, which was insanely controversial. I believe, if I remember correctly, the commercial was she saw a protest and she decided to join it without knowing what the protest was about. Well, the protest is very unclear on what it was, but everyone agrees that it was about Black Lives Matter. And then in the commercial, she joined and then handed a Pepsi can to a police officer. And somehow that was supposed to mean unity, but in reality created a lot of confusion, right?
Yeah. I remember people just found it really tone deaf overall, you know.
100%.
These issues aren't as simple to solve. It's just like handing a can of Pepsi. And I remember Pepsi taking a lot of heat for that.
And I remember SNL also made fun of them big time. Which, yeah. And also 2017 was the year when IKEA started their virtual reality store. So they started this in Australia. And the idea was that you can use VR goggles to see furniture up close, right? And if you didn't have the goggles, you were able to see it on a desktop computer without, you know, the 3D aspect of it. More like Street View from Google Maps, you know?
Yeah.
You were able to use it in that way. So two really big things, not only for digital marketing, but for like marketing in general that happened in 2017. And it's so crazy to think, right? Like, see how much it has advanced.
It's also interesting, too, thinking about, like, managing ads in 2017. It definitely felt like costs were much lower back then. Like, we were able to drive a better cost per lead, cost per click was lower. Overall, just better metrics.
And I remember that optimizations had a bigger impact on things, right? As opposed to now post iOS 14. A campaign would run by itself. Like, nobody would be managing it. And it would survive. It would do mediocre results, but it would, you know, keep going. If you do that now, you just won't get results, right? You have to be like on top of it. Like you need more work and to be on top of things more. Back then, it's just you would see more results after, you know, it was like a plant, right? Like
you had to water it and let it go. And I think one thing too that we've kind of seen grow is machine learning. Back then we had algorithms and stuff like that, but the machine learning wasn't as impactful as it is nowadays. There's definitely been a shift over the last couple of years. So back then in 2017 too, it was a lot of manual optimizations, right? We took a lot of the labor and put it on ourselves. And over time, it's kind of grown into a situation where it's a lot of auto placements and auto bidding and things along those lines. But back in 2017, it was a lot of manual bidding, right? Mm-hmm. We were using bids to control our spend, to control our cost per lead. And nowadays it's like you pretty much always just set your campaign to like lowest cost, right? And we let the system kind of pick the bid. But back then it was very much us manually looking at all of those metrics and pulling all of the levers ourselves.
I remember all of the bidding took a lot of space in my notes for sure. And then there was some year, maybe 2019, that we just stopped doing that. It's just like let it automatically do that.
Yeah, because as the machine learning advanced, these platforms were pretty much like, we can do all the optimizations for you. Now, as a marketer, I still don't always trust them to do everything, but it's getting to the point where sometimes they don't even give us an option.
Yeah. And then definitely another aspect that you can test, right? Like if you're not seeing results and you're out of assets to test, that changing the bid can also provide you with different results.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember changing the bid used to be a huge optimization that we used to make, and now we don't really make that change anymore.
No.
Nope. Everything's pretty much set to like lowest cost now. Moving into 2018, this might just be towards us specifically because we work together, but I remember that's when we started making a big shift. Keep in mind, we said this in a previous episode, but we started with a very like lead gen focus. So 2018 is kind of when we made a huge shift from lead landing pages to lead ads. Now, lead ads have been around for a while now at that point. They had launched in 2015, but it definitely took a few years for it to catch on with marketers. And if you aren't sure what the difference between a landing page and a lead ad is, a landing page, it takes you off the site to your landing page. It has some downsides because you have the time it takes to load your page. Some people don't like being taken out of the environment that they're in. It's just extra clicks for them to submit their form. So you definitely have an issue with cost there versus a lead form that keeps the user in the app that they're in. Sometimes it will autofill their information and it's just less clicks. You don't have to wait for a landing page to load. So you see a higher volume.
I remember there was a lot of anticipation for lead ads back then. And it definitely, we saw very low cost per leads for sure. It didn't mean that those leads were better quality, right? It just, in a way, it made things easier, but then created more work because we had to like go through all these new leads that we were getting and trying to figure out, okay, is this a real person? Is this person truly interested? Or did this person press that send button on accident?
Yeah, Anthony makes a really good point with that. It was always kind of like a tightrope, right? You're walking, balancing quality versus quantity. And I think a lot of marketers actually ran into that same issue when it came to lead ads.
And boy, did I learn about lead generation, thinking about lead health. That was like one of the biggest learning curves of that job, for sure. But I am so glad that I had it because I learned so much about it and the impact that it does. It was also really cool that Facebook would generate data on clicks and, I don't know if you could measure bounce rate on the lead ad, or like on the form, but you could also create audiences based on people that clicked on your ad but didn't submit the form, didn't actually click send. So it's really cool because on the landing page, some people may have set up their cookies so they're not tracked. So that's data that we cannot get. But on the Facebook platform, app or interface, there's no really way for you to not get tracked if you're within the platform. So that was also really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Those audiences that you can make off of lead ads is really valuable. And I think we kind of forgot to mention too, was at one point, I would say probably closer to 2017, maybe even a little bit before that, was the shift to mobile. Users shifting out of desktop and using their mobile devices. That's when we started creating responsive landing pages. Mm-hmm. Everything has to be optimized for mobile. And I think that mobile definitely was a huge shift that we're still seeing today. People consume content on their mobile devices over using their laptop. So definitely another one we wanted to hit on.
And I also remember like the tracking, right? The tracking aspect was like the little new hot toy that us marketers were playing with. And I remember in 2018 also was when the European Union decided to implement the GDPR, which stands for General Data Protection Regulation, which is one of the toughest privacy and security laws that, they set up in the world. So basically, this law said that you had to be very explicit about the data that you collect from people in the European Union, have to make it very explicit why you're going to use it for and for how long. And if you break the rules, you could be sued and charged up to 20 million euros or like 4% of your global revenue, whatever's higher. So it was definitely very tough. And like putting it in terms of like today, right? It would mean like if you are going to collect someone's email address and name, as simple as that is, you would have like your privacy policy would have to be really long and really detailed, which, it would make people less likely to submit their information, right? Because we're lazy. We don't want to go through a bunch of text just to submit our information.
Yeah, I do remember when like data privacy and data protection was a super big hot topic in digital marketing, and the GDPR was definitely a huge one that had an impact on that we still see today.
Absolutely. And one other big thing that happened in 2018 was that Instagram launched IGTV, which was a way for Instagram to rival YouTube and entice people to watch videos bought on the Instagram app. I remember this was huge. And I remember like you would click on a video and then it would expand and then the videos would be vertical. I guess that was the biggest difference, right? That YouTube videos would be more horizontal and IGTV would be like a vertical.
I remember too, because we were really big into the Try Guys at that point.
Yes.
Shout out Try Guys. But I remember we would see it and sometimes we'd watch it on IGTV, or at least I did. I'd be scrolling like Instagram and I'd be like, oh, they just dropped their new episode. But definitely for the most part, I consumed that on YouTube. But it was definitely a good effort by Instagram to try and take over that market, although I'm not sure how successful it was for them.
Yeah, eventually it transitioned to Instagram video. If I'm not mistaken, the Instagram video encompasses Reels now. I believe IGTV is dead as of today, unfortunately.
R.I.P.
Yeah, exactly.
It's out there with Vine now.
Yeah. Well, actually, they were rivals, right? Or it
no,
was like
Vine was a long time ago.
Oh, okay.
Although I will say with Instagram Reels, it just feels like a copy of TikTok. I'm like,
it definitely is.
And a lot of people will download TikToks and then post them on Reels, and I'm like, guys, these TikToks are like 3 months old. What are you doing?
She is a huge TikTok fan.
Oh, always on TikTok. So yeah, when I saw Reels come out, I was like, these are just outdated TikToks.
Exactly. Yeah.
Instagram definitely is copying TikTok with Reels, but IGTV was a good way for them to kind of try and compete with YouTube. It just didn't work out. But another thing that happened, I would say, more into like 2019 is content became really relevant.
I remember running ads that feature articles and testimonials was huge. Something that 1 or 2 years before that, I would have never imagined, right? Like you would always try to run ads to a landing page that had a very clear call to action and like it made it very easy for them to make the purchase or, submit their information. But then in 2019, I was sending people to a landing page with an article and testimonial. And like we wanted to create this like brand awareness aspect, right? And like in that way, keep them in our retargeting, because once they go to the landing page, then that would be website traffic that you can retarget them for like 30 days or whatever your ranges were at the time.
Yeah, and I think that content marketing has been around for a while now, right? I think it started out as a lot of blogging. People thought, oh, okay, I blog or I make a blog post, but we definitely saw the shift into creating content that felt native to platforms for sure. Content that sometimes you couldn't even recognize was an ad. And I also think that influencer marketing at some point in, the last 5 years really took off. I mean, before that, you didn't really know what an influencer was, right? Back when Facebook was just starting, there weren't like Facebook influencers. I will say in my space, we had like scene queens and scene kings for anyone who remembers what the scene was back then. And I guess that's the first like influencer. That's when like Jeffree Star. You remember Jeffree Star?
We're getting old, Alexa.
Yeah, we're getting old. That's when Jeffree Star got really popular, was MySpace. But I think definitely in the last 5 years, influencers have become a huge thing, and marketers are taking advantage of that, whether it's a brand deal, partnering with them to create an ad or to create a piece of content for them. So definitely in 2019, that was a huge hot topic, was influencer marketing, content, videos, testimonials, blogs, any type of content that you could get out there to help your user kind of engage, right? And to feel connected to a brand and help kind of create a story for them.
Oh, well, we were talking about TikTok before, but something that I just remembered, in 2019, that was the year when TikTok took over the world, and they got their first billion downloads, and that's when it became really, really popular, right before the pandemic.
Which is good, because I started watching TikTok about 2020 when I was just sitting at home because of the pandemic. So yeah, I'm glad TikTok came out.
I remember during the pandemic, I tried to like make those dance videos, but like I don't know why I chose the really complicated dance videos and just got frustrated. Like, too hard.
Yeah, I would say for the last couple of years as a TikTok user, I have very much just been like a watcher of TikToks. It isn't until recently that I've kind of dove into actually creating my own.
So another big thing that happened in 2019 was that Google introduced BERT, an algorithm that stands for bidirectional encoded representations from transformers. I hope I said that correctly. So basically this algorithm was the biggest update on Google's algorithm to make it more responsive to context. So I'm going to try to give you an example of BERT as well as I can. So in an area of England, they call a certain species of sea bass cows. So in that area, when they were Googling about fishing of cows, they would get results related to cattle, to cows. And that wasn't very useful for them. So after BERT, which was more sensitive to context, the algorithm was able to see the word fishing and provide them results about fishing for this specific type of fish. So basically in that example, it tells you basically how context would be or would help Google provide you the results or the exact results that you were looking for. And that's what BERT did for us in 2019.
Yeah, and I think that brings us into like the topic of relevant content that year over year becomes a bigger topic of conversation. I think back when marketing first started, we kind of touched on it. It was you pay a placement and it's kind of there and you don't really care about the content behind it, right? The context, it being relevant. And as we've seen over the years with machine learning and things like that, relevance is super, super important. That's the reason Google created the quality score, why Facebook has a quality score. And I think that BERT was a good example of Google trying to make sure that things were relevant to the user.
And it went as far as like crawling into little landing pages, into websites, because they were trying to make sure like the content was relevant to search queries. And I would say from my own experience that they have done a really good job. Like, I have never made a Google search that didn't coincide to what I was looking for, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think as a user too, I would much rather have content that's relevant than to be searching, for example, cow fishing and to have like a regular dairy cow pop up.
Exactly.
So into 2020.
It's a huge year. A lot of things happened, a lot of things changed for us.
Where do we even begin? Oh.
So that was the year that I started working as a freelancer full time. The pandemic opened up the doors for me to start doing that. And then I started working remotely 100%. And I moved to Mexico. And I was working from there. I can tell you a little bit more about that. But definitely COVID opened the possibilities for me to work remotely 100% and start doing marketing on my own.
Yeah, and I think a lot of, people went remote, but I think a lot of businesses went remote too. A lot of brick and mortar stores decided to really lean into e-commerce. People went into shutdowns, they went into lockdowns, they weren't able to go shopping in a store. And the way these companies stayed afloat was to use e-commerce to bring in new customers.
Mm-hmm. And that's why we saw our costs go up for sure.
Yeah, I would definitely say in 2020 there was an increase of cost and increase of competition in the marketplace. So 2020, we did see a big shift in retailers going virtual and e-commerce. We also saw events going virtual because we were on lockdown, right? So a lot of concerts happened virtually. I remember I saw a Miley Cyrus concert virtually. That was with a Google event, but still, normally that Google event is in person. Google and Facebook got into some hot water as well. The DOJ brought lawsuits against Google, claiming they had exclusive and anti-competitive partnerships. Essentially, they were arguing that they were building a monopoly in the search and online advertising game. Facebook did face similar lawsuits as well by the FTC. They had an investigation on anti-competitive claims. It included most of the United States. And one other thing that happened, which would have been a huge deal for me, was that the government threatened to ban TikTok. They did this because of data vulnerability issues. 2020 was definitely a rough year for the Zuck and for Google going through those lawsuits.
I'm actually tired of hearing about 2020, even in 2022. It was a little traumatic.
Yeah, let's forget 2020 ever happened and let's move into 2021.
Yay! Which is the same crap, but a different year.
Wow, that is the most accurate statement that I have heard about these last few years.
Yeah.
So in 2021, I know I've touched on this in other episodes briefly, but one big thing in digital marketing that I have to mention were the supply chain issues. Not only did they affect our personal lives and our jobs, they affected the advertising auction. Basically, companies were struggling to meet their current demand that they had. They weren't able to fulfill orders. They weren't able to get orders shipped and delivered in time. So because of that, companies actually started pulling back on their advertising budgets. They didn't want to keep advertising for a product that they couldn't fulfill, essentially. You know, that was good for me as a marketer because that helped definitely drive my costs down. But yeah, the supply chain issue played a huge role in the marketing space.
Definitely a huge issue for for any marketer selling products, but for any marketer selling services, for things that are not tangible, that was a great opportunity.
One big thing that we cannot ignore was the iOS 14 update.
Dun, dun, dun.
That was a huge topic. Facebook was not happy about that update, and they are still not happy about that update. If you don't know, essentially what the iOS 14 update did is it required app developers to include a prompt. So what happens is you download an app, you open it for the first time, a prompt appears. And it basically gives the user the option to either opt into tracking or opt out of it. Now, most people are obviously going to opt out of it, right? So it creates a really good user experience in a way. They get control of their own data, things along those lines. But from a marketing perspective, it makes things really challenging for us.
For sure. Like our audiences, like remarketing audiences especially, became less reliable. And then when remarketing audiences become less reliable, our lookalikes become less reliable as well. And something I wanted to mention about this pop-up, right? That you have to allow the app to track you. That pop-up is a little bit intimidating, don't you think?
Yeah, I actually haven't updated my phone, so I do.
Since last year?
No, I don't update it ever. I don't fall into the Apple track or the Apple trap where they make you update your iOS every couple of months. I just am running on a very, very old, outdated version.
Are you on iOS 13, Alexis?
Most likely.
Wow. Good for you.
Yes, with my iPhone 8 Plus. So.
Oh, nice. And we still run into issues today. It's just we have found ways to work around it and get used to it. And I've seen the agencies that I work with changing the way their services are offered, right? So now instead of promising sales or conversions, we're promising exposure, reach, impressions, which is something some businesses are interested in. And that's just a very different way to sell your marketing services, but it's still a way to stay in business and don't overpromise. like don't fall short on your promises, basically.
Yeah, definitely going for more of like a branding strategy. And I mean, don't get me wrong, you're still able to have successful campaigns, right? You can have a successful remarketing strategy. It's just, it's not going to be as big of an audience as it probably once was. You're not going to have as much insight into your metrics. They're not going to be as accurate as they used to be at one point.
And as a business owner, you just have to be more in tune with your audience. Keep a database, collect emails, have like a very strong email marketing strategy, and find ways to drive people to your social media platforms organically.
Absolutely. And I think while we're on the topic of like tracking and things like that, I do want to kind of touch on Facebook's targeting options over the years. So Facebook, I don't know, Anthony, if you've noticed year over year, but like every year it seems like Facebook is reducing the targeting that they have available.
It's just it's just like our society gets more picky about being, like our privacy being invaded, right? I think that's one of the main reasons why that happens. But yeah, we see it reduce year over year.
Yeah, so in 2018, Facebook was really focusing on discriminatory targeting. That's back when the Black Lives Matter movement was really big. Racial justice was a big topic. So Facebook actually ended up deleting more than 5,000 targeting options in order to stop potential discriminatory targeting. In 2019, Facebook also announced special categories. What these do is they limit targeting for certain industries. So for example, housing or employment. Some of these limitations are that you cannot target people based off their zip code, or that you cannot target people based off of their gender or their age. It's just a way for Facebook to kind of create fairness in industries. But it's also made it kind of hard, I think, for some industries, these special categories or these reduction in targeting.
Definitely super annoying. I was going to say that this all just comes down to politics ruining everything, at least from what I've seen. Because, you have products and services that you sell, and like sometimes those are, I hate to say it, but it's true. It's like race oriented, right? Like some products are for the Hispanic market, right? And that has to do with the language on, the product or service.
Well, you have a client like that right now.
Yeah. So I have clients that sell hair products. And as you know, there's a lot of different hair types out there. And the best way for us to target to our different demographics was by ethnicity, right? We don't have those options anymore. But what is wrong about, offering you the right type of hair product that you may need, right?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I can see how advertisers used it to discriminate against people, like how that information could be used in that way. But it also kind of sucks as a marketer where you really want to get the message or the product out to people that it's most relevant for. I mean, it's a user experience at the end of the day, right? You want to see content that's relevant for you, and it's kind of limited that. And that kind of brings me into the 2021 option that Facebook will now not allow targeting from customer lists or lookalike audiences for people under 16. So in the example of where I work, it's a university. And obviously we want to target people who are seniors in high school. And that's made it really hard because we now can no longer upload a custom list and be able to target these people. And the messaging that we want to get them is like, hey, we have an open house. It's not even like sign up like at this moment. It's like we have a behind the scenes tour. We have an open house, like come view the campus. And we're not able to target them that way on Facebook anymore. And then in 2022, so we jump into this year, starting January 19th, Facebook is also removing additional detailed targeting options. It's going to be topics that people may perceive as sensitive. So topics referencing specific causes, organizations, or public figures that relate to like health, race, ethnicity, political affiliations, religion, and sexual orientation.
I mean, it is very frustrating that all these changes happen in effect as marketers we're just genuinely trying to sell something, right? But then when you look into the specifics of why this change happened, you see like there was really an issue there.
Yeah, you're like, I get it, but I don't like it.
Exactly. And it's like, if maybe we created rules to address the issue itself instead of just affecting the whole platform, right? That could be, it's just like, I guess it's just easier said than done, right?
Yeah, they'd rather just, put a blanket rule on it instead of having to try and, nitpick the certain ones that are bad.
I mean, you're always going to get ads, right? You're always going to get ads. You're using a platform that you pay nothing for, right? but still get all the benefits of it. So if you're still going to get ads, wouldn't it be better to get ads that are relevant to you, that would make your life easier?
So the funny thing is, I'm always torn between that question. Because as a marketer, like, yes, I want you to give me all the ways to target people. But as a user, I hate ads.
Yeah.
I get ads on YouTube and I'm like, oh, who puts these things on here? Like, so it's definitely a balancing act for me between wanting to be like a great marketer and hit all the right people and wanting to be like, don't serve me any ad. I don't want to see it.
At this point, I'm just numb to ads. But like, I have to say the ones on YouTube are really annoying, especially when you're doing yoga on YouTube and then you get an ad in the middle of it and then you're there on like downward dog and you're like, okay, how do I skip this?
It just messes with your zen, right?
Yeah, totally. Oh.
One other topic too that I think we forgot to mention as we were going through our timeline was the shift to dynamic ad types. So Google has introduced the Discovery product, which I think is a really good example of dynamic ad types. So essentially you upload multiple assets. You upload multiple images, multiple headlines, multiple descriptions, and it creates various ad formats using those assets. So it's giving you a great way to kind of let the machine learning do the optimization for you. Facebook has a similar one in the case where you can upload multiple images, multiple headlines, and multiple assets. And it does the same thing. It'll use different combinations and show it to the user. So you're using essentially the algorithm and the machine learning to give the messaging and the imagery that the system thinks will make the user click, give them a higher chance of clicking and responding to it.
Did you ever play with dynamic ads on Facebook? Which sounds really, really similar.
So I did. You're talking about the dynamic ad type, right?
Correct. Yeah, the one that is the same. You put several images, several ad copies, and then you let the algorithm decide what to show.
So I've done it. So there's kind of two ways you can do it on Facebook, right? So there's like the specific dynamic ad type, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that is where you go in, you create a dynamic ad. But the issue I've had with that is it only lets you create one ad per ad set.
Yeah, that's correct.
Exactly. And I really, really dislike that because what if I want to put in a different dynamic ad with different images in different copy and see how the two ads perform against each other? I can't do that. But there's another option in Facebook where you can create just a regular ad and you still add multiple images and you can still add multiple headlines.
Right. So that's more like a carousel or not?
No, it's just a regular ad. And I don't really understand what the difference is.
Yeah, I guess I have to research more into that. But like, I've found it really useful for advertising events. So when you have an event, a landing page that, everyone has to sign up by a certain date, right? Social proofing is not that much of an issue because I guess that's the biggest issue with dynamic ads on Facebook, right? So like you put all the assets into Facebook and then it just creates so many different variations, and like social proof, it's not attainable, right? You can't do it because there's so many variations. So like when you create a non-dynamic ad, you have the option of using that same post ID to create other ads and use that same social proofing.
What do you mean by social proof?
Social proof: likes, engagement, shares, comments. I've seen the ads that have a lot of comments, shares, and likes. It's just Facebook prioritizes them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they just do better. They just seem more relevant. So the problem with dynamic ads is that you don't really get that part of it. But if you're running an event campaign, right? So after a certain date, those ads are going to be ended. I find it really useful because you don't have to really worry about that. You just put everything together and let Facebook decide. And that has really worked out for me.
Yeah, I think dynamic ads is definitely where it's at lately, for sure. I know I mentioned machine learning and how it's kind of taking over the world at this point. And as much as I hate to give over control to these algorithms and these systems, I think the one thing I do trust them to do is to create multiple variations of an ad. It takes out work for me as a marketer to have to kind of create, 100, well, not 100, that's an exaggeration, to create, 20 different versions of an ad.
And then the naming conventions, and then the tracking, and then, it definitely alleviates that work and then allows for focus on audiences and targeting. So
yeah,
you get to focus on that spectrum and really find the things that are working out, which, now is a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. So, Anthony, if you had to think back over these last 5 years, what would you say is the one most impactful thing that has happened in the digital marketing space?
Oh, yeah, I was going to ask about my personal life or like digital marketing.
I care, but we're going to keep this on topic.
I sense sarcasm there. Okay.
Hey.
Most significant thing, and even if I don't like it, I would say iOS 14 for me. It really impacted the way that I deliver results to my clients. I was very happy to see that some of the clients that I have stayed, and to this day they haven't left, and they completely understand. And, I guess the clients that are still doing good after the iOS 14 are the ones that are very adaptable, and they understand that market changes and the needs of your market change. So you just have to adapt to it and find ways to make it work.
Yeah, and I think that's great too. I think iOS 14 is something that we can't ignore. And that's awesome that you have clients who were able to be adaptable, because I know a lot of clients I had, they didn't really understand that. They're like, what do you mean we can't do this anymore?
Yeah.
I would say for me, personally, in my work experience, the biggest thing that has had an impact was the supply chain shortage. We were having major CPM issues leading up to that. We were having major CPM issues leading up to the launch of iOS 14. I have a theory that Facebook was purposely not working in the lead up to iOS 14 because they were focused on that. And then once iOS 14 dropped, they decided to go back and fix all their issues. But that's just my personal theory. But the supply chain shortage had a huge impact in my business and driving costs down for us. And we are still seeing the impacts from that today. So yeah, in the case of what I do, the lead gen aspect of it, our CPMs went down with less competition in the marketplace.
Isn't that great? Well, I mean, you don't sell like products, like tangible things, right?
Yeah, but we're still competing for the same audiences at the end of the day.
So I know you didn't ask, but in my personal life, working remotely and making things easier for that, I really like it. I was really big on working remotely since before that, because I think commuting is stupid and a waste of time. Not if you're listening to this podcast in your car, that doesn't apply there. But for me, in so many ways, like working from home, you have to learn how to separate, like your home time and work time. But I find it really good that I get more time to focus on things that matter to me.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. In my personal life, that would also be the best thing that has happened to me, because I really, really enjoy working remote, and I will never go back to an office ever again.
I think we're just gonna get better at working remotely.
Yeah.
It has been really cool to look back about how things have changed, and gave me a lot of appreciation about what we have now. Like, even though things are hard and they suck sometimes, machine learning has improved so much that has made our life easier and allowed us to focus on more important things rather than optimizations and bits and stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree. It's amazing kind of to look back to when we started with marketing to where we are now, and just how much it has changed. It is totally different when it comes to strategy, assets, ad types than it was when we started. So I think definitely taking a look at these past 5 years has been really awesome. So with that being said, thank you guys for tuning in to this edition of the Digital Rundown podcast. Go ahead, drop some comments, whether you're watching on YouTube, leave a review if you're listening on one of our podcasts. Let us know the ways that you think digital marketing has changed in the last 5 years and what things have impacted you. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead, click the thumbs up button, click the bell notification so that you get notified anytime we drop a new video. If you are tuning in on our podcast, make sure to subscribe. That way you get notified anytime we drop a new video. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.
They will get results related to cattle, related to cows, the moose. So after Bert, with the context of fishing, I said moose on purpose. This is gonna be great bloopers.
Did you see me try to keep a straight face?
Yes, I could feel it. It was great.